You don't want to end up like the spokesman for Subway, do you?
Did you just use a term that excludes women from an occupation?
Okay, let's back up.
Ah! Did you just say spokesman instead of spokesperson when women are just as capable of selling sandwiches as anyone? Are you purposefully trying to use words that assert your male privilege?
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes. Obviously, yesterday we had the news that John Kent is coming out. He's confirmed bisexual in Superman Son of Kal-El #5 from Tom Taylor. And today is New Comic Book Day, at least for DC Comics. And we got Superman and the Authority #4 from Grant Morrison. And another reminder that there is certainly an agenda being pushed at DC Comics right now. Whether you're for it and you think the gender, race, sexuality, and even gender swaps of a lot of these traditionally white, straight male heroes is good. If you're in favor of it, that's fine. You can have your opinion, and I would never fault anyone for cheering on something that they truly think is necessary and they support. Or if you're completely against all the gender, race, sexuality kind of swaps that are going on within DC Comics, if you're against that, I completely understand where you're coming from, and I support your right to oppose it and criticize these changes. Either one, if you're for it or against these changes, you have to be able to admit what you're seeing happening right in front of your face. That's just the whole point of this video. Whether you're for it or you're against it, it's clear that DC Comics is going in a very different direction, and it is their prerogative, I guess, that they are their characters, and they are going to push a more progressive agenda within their comic books. And it's not like they haven't done that in the past, but they're certainly going a little bit more in your face about it. And of course, we're going to talk about this. Apparently, I was not serious enough yesterday when talking about some of my criticisms of what Tom Taylor is doing with Superman. And I'll get into that here in a little bit. I'll get a little bit more serious about it and really go in there and identify the issues that I have with it. But before that, not only are we getting, a clear agenda as far as, progressive ideas being pushed within DC Comics, we are getting another agenda, which we'll talk about first. And this is a slap in the face of all comic book readers. And this comic by Grant Morrison, who certainly is one of the most influential comic creators of their generation of all times. Grant Morrison, on their best day, is one of the greatest comic book writers of all times. But Grant Morrison, on their worst day, is just a really bad comic book writer. And I think I came in for Superman and the Authority #1. I read about halfway through issue #2, realized that this comic book wasn't for me. I came in just to check out this latest issue, and it's gotten worse. And I'm going to talk about two specific pages that are clear indications that, yes, this agenda is going forward, but there is no longer any standard as far as writing either. So whether you're for it or you're against it, you're going to have some really, really bad writing quality to get through, likely due to just a overwhelmed and overburdened DC editorial staff. And I guess if you're editing a Grant Morrison comic, you're like, well, Grant Morrison's one of the greatest writers of all times. I will just let Grant Morrison do what Grant Morrison does, regardless of the quality of the writing. So here's the first picture from Superman the Authority #4. This is Midnighter having a fist fight. This stuff is so bad. The next page is even more cringe, but this one's terrible. They're having a fist fight, and this is Midnighter. If I wasn't married, if I wasn't gay, I'd marry you just for the fights. And she says, you're gay? Used to be you would never run into other out queers in the field. Midnighter says, is this combat or a pride march? I sense your heart somewhere else. How much are they paying you? And she replies, a fortune in Bitcoin NTFs. Ultra Humanite says his art will be priceless once he rules the world. So we get a little, the bad guys in favor of NFTs and Bitcoin. Midnighter says, you need serious financial advice, or we can fight to a standstill. And she says, I'm the law. Midnighter says, thought for the day. Bone spears are made to do one thing, and it's not to hand out financial advice. That's a real page of comic written by one of the greatest comic writers of their generation, Grant Morrison. I defy you to come into these comments and tell me that this page right here is quality writing presented by DC Comics as they're pushing this agenda that I think we can all agree, whether you're for it or you're against it, is clearly something that is on DC's mind and something that they want to push forward using their characters and their platform, whether it be the comic books, animation, movies, television. This is the second page. It gets worse. Now, this has not been confirmed yet, but it appears that the new O.M.A.C, creation of Jack Kirby, and there's been different versions of this character, and this is obviously Grant Morrison's version of O.M.A.C. O.M.A.C is a character with the purple hair and the green suit. Traditionally a cyborg, appears to be now a trans cyborg. And you got to hear this conversation with... Oh my goodness. Okay, let's go. This is Superman. Most of you, myself included, have reasons to lie low, even disappear for a while. That's exactly what we're gonna do. Light Ray, you're essential to this, and frankly, you'll be safer far from Earth. Light Ray says, I was born on Mars in a parallel universe. I've been promising a social media detox like forever. Apparently, even if you're from Mars in a parallel universe, you need a Twitter timeout. And they continue. Whatever happens, Mac's part of the deal. Mac. Obviously, that's O.M.A.C. O.M.A.C says, what Leah said. Me and she, we're mac and cheese. Stars and stripes, cops and protesters, laws and outlaws. Where she goes, I'm there. Pronouns, he, him, they. In the real world, and this is obviously a comic book, but you want the writing to be top notch. Do people really talk like this? Have you ever gone up to somebody and be like, you're with me, kid? And they're like, pronouns. Like superior and your majesty. Like no one talks like that. It sounds weird. Obviously, Superman continues. I didn't expect this, but the extra muscle you bring makes a considerable asset, O.M.A.C. You're welcome to join us if you're up for a scrap. What's next? A place on their team for their hairdresser and stylist? Apparently, that dude's pronoun is butt stain. This is what O.M.A.C says. What'd you just say, butt stain? Nothing. I'll be that indecipherable accent of mine, love. Mr. Black likes to keep us on our toes, long as we don't step on his. And then we get Midnighter. Far from Earth, Superman. Superman says, I told you I had plans to change the world, Midnighter. I didn't say which world. Planet Earth has problems we may find ourselves addressing soon enough, but there are other worlds where we can make a difference right now. I defy you. Come into my comment section. Tell me this is quality writing, but it's certainly a change to an existing character created by one of the greatest, most influential creators, if not the most influential comic creator of all time, Jack Kirby. O.M.A.C. And you say this is Grant Morrison's version of O.M.A.C. Oh, okay, I'll give you that. There have been different versions of O.M.A.C. in the past, but what do you think? Grant Morrison certainly does not have the stature as far as the accolades or the all-time accomplishments of Jack Kirby, although Grant Morrison has quite a few. What do you think if a new DC writer went in and maybe started making some changes to some of Grant Morrison's characters, like a Lord Fanny from The Invisibles, as a DC product released under Vertigo, trans character? Do you think, I don't know, would people be upset or think it was unfair to take the original creator, Grant Morrison's idea of what this character is supposed to be, maybe stay true to what the character represents, but doing a little, I don't know, gender identity flip on the character? Do you think people would be upset about this? I think they would. And you know what? I would be upset about it. I would be here on my channel and I would say that's wrong, because I'm actually quite I'm quite consistent with my opinions on these sorts of things. And I think it would be wrong for someone to go in and change Grant Morrison's work on Lord Fanny and the Invisibles, or Danny Street from Doom Patrol, probably a better known character. I would think if someone came in to Doom Patrol, took Danny the Street, Grant Morrison's original character, within that series, and did a gender identity swap on the character, I would say that was wrong. And you would hear it right here from my mouth on this channel. Because that is not who the character is. But as long as you're, well, in the case of O.M.A.C, it's a cyborg, but as long as you're wiping out like a straight white male character, all bets are off. You're allowed to do all these things. You can do gender swaps, race swaps, sexual identity swaps, whatever it is that you need to do to make this character. Because apparently all straight white males, even if they're heroes, they're inherently bad and they need to be changed, then altered in some way to represent some other type of marginalized community. And we can go into the words of Tom Taylor concerning John Kent, and you can parse them down, and you can really get an idea that this is certainly an agenda-driven change. It's not a natural change for the character within the DC universe that's been planned out, or the seeds have been planted for John Kent, which is certainly not a creation of Tom Taylor's. But he gets carte blanche, make these changes. And I will say this. I do not find it surprising or coincidental that these agendas are being pushed further now that Daniel Cherry III is the new general manager of DC Comics. Certainly has no comic book experience, but if you were to go on their LinkedIn page, it's quite clear that they're an LGBTQ activist. And that's something that's that's an important part of their identity. There's nothing wrong with that. You can go out there and support whatever causes that you want to. You can go out there and be part of movements and stuff like this. But at the end of the day, you have to be a professional. And in his professional opinion and in his ability to enact change within DC Comics, I think it's clear that Daniel Cherry III is an agent of change within DC, pushing a more progressive agenda when it comes to the racial, gender, and sexual identities of the characters. Now, you could say, Wes, but the Jace Fox Batman was an idea from Dan Didio. Yes, it was. I'm sure that he probably was much in favor of it. But we're seeing a lot more of these changes all come in. And I'll get to that here in a little bit. These are the quotes, the quote that I'll talk about from Tom Taylor, since I mentioned it earlier. I got a little off track. I'm sorry about that. This is what he said, and I mentioned it in yesterday's video. Over the years in this industry, it probably won't surprise you to hear I've had queer characters in storylines rejected. I felt like I was letting down people I loved every time this happened. So it's clear that Tom Taylor, as a writer, wants to come in and bring in more queer characters and storylines. And I'm in favor of this. We do need, more queer characters brought to the forefront, LGBTQ plus characters brought to the forefront within DC and Marvel Comics. I wholeheartedly believe that. My issue is not with that, actually. My issue is when you're changing other people's creations and changing characters. If you follow the channel, you would know that. And he continues. But we are in a very different and much more welcome place today than we were 10 or even 5 years ago. When I was asked if I wanted, so he was asked if he wanted to write Superman with a new #1 for the DC Universe. Listen to this. I knew replacing Clark with another straight white savior could be a real opportunity missed. He's not changing John Kent because it's natural within the character's origins or the flow of the character or what has been established with John Kent in the future. He's changing this because he wants to change Superman from being a straight white savior into whatever he envisions Superman, and he thinks it will be good moving forward. Whether it is or isn't is not, that's debatable. That's all in the eye of the beholder. But it's clear from the words that he said, he is pushing his agenda, his social agenda, using DC Comics characters, which he did not create, but he has been given license to write with. It's quite clear from the words that he says. Those are not from my mouth. Those are from his mouth. When I was asked if I wanted to write a new Superman with a new #1 for the DC Universe, I knew replacing Clark with another straight white savior could be a real opportunity missed. So therefore, this was an opportunity to replace a traditionally straight white character with an LGBTQ representative character. And that is part of the agenda that's being pushed forward. And here's the problem, though, is there are actually a lot of LGBTQ plus representative characters within the DC universe, and almost none of them outside of Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy are prominently featured. And the ones that are besides that, for the most part, don't even get acknowledged anymore. When's the last time you heard or it was represented that a Catwoman was an LGBTQ plus character? When's the last time that Wonder Woman was presented as a representative character for those groups? They act like it never happened. Yet, obviously we saw in Superman and the Authority, Midnighter is playing a small role. You essentially have a gay version of Batman and Superman that are together and married. We haven't seen Midnighter and Apollo heavily featured in DC Comics in years. Why isn't that couple, those characters that everyone loves, that are LGBTQ plus representative in a loving, caring relationship, why aren't they prominently featured? Well, because you can't have a version of Superman. You have to have the Superman. You can't have a version of Batman. You have to have a Robin to do this, where you already have the characters within the universe that are actually pretty popular and well known and established that you could be featured. But that's not enough. You have Kate Kane. I guess it's not Kate Kane in the TV show anymore. They replaced her with another character. But Kate Kane, Batwoman, part of the Bat family, very well known, respected character. Clearly LGBTQ plus. Actually was supposed to get married not that long ago, and DC Comics put the kibosh on it because it obviously was a different time. And I think that character probably should have been married at that time. And I think DC Comics made a mistake in that decision. When's the last time we saw Batwoman? Like 3 years ago? Sometimes Batwoman shows up, not featured at all within DC Comics. You have an LGBTQ plus character waiting to be utilized and heavily featured that has a lineage going back to the Bat family. You can't have Batwoman. You got to have Robin, right? Or there's a lot of new characters that have been introduced. When I reviewed Young Justice #1 from Brian Michael Bendis, I've specifically mentioned the one character that was created and introduced in there that stood out amongst the rest that would be kind of cool and had a unique factor to him that could, I think, maybe not be an A or B or C-list character, but a character that could be prominent within DC Comics and have some personality that felt, not completely original because the character is a ripoff of Jonah Hex, is Ginny Hex. Ginny Hex, since Young Justice was canceled, Ginny Hex wasn't exactly featured in that series either, has had a one-shot. Everyone liked that comic book that's read it. You'll never see Ginny Hex again, because it's an original LGBTQ plus character. It would be too much work to get that character over with readers and to make them feel important. So you put a one-shot out with a writer that doesn't really sell comic books, with an up-and-coming artist. Gleb Melnikoff is kicking ass and taking names on Robin right now. And then you just drop the character. And then the next time we get a Pride anthology, you might see Ginny Hex again. You might see Kate Kane again. There's a chance we might get a Midnighter or an Apollo story in there. But they don't get their own stories because they're not important enough. You've got to change all these other characters. If you look right now, there's no need for Justice League Queer when everybody was up in arms, for that title to be featured like in that stupid DC Round Robin, where it was essentially, destined to fail because it was up against Robins. You've got John Kent Superman. You got Joe Mullins, the Green Lantern, Tim Drake Robin, Jess Chambers Flash, Diana Prince, if you want to acknowledge that she's LGBTQ plus, Wonder Woman, and Jackson Hyde Aquaman. This stuff's not by accident. It's all part of an agenda. It's all pushing this here. And it's all pushing that forward. And if you're cool with that agenda and you're supportive of it, that's fine. I have no problems with that. Enjoy what you like. If you want to buy those comics and this is what you want to support, go out and support it vocally. But don't sit there and denigrate people for identifying something that is clearly happening and clearly there. We can all acknowledge what's happening and have different points of view and perspective on whether or not it's good or not. And if if you are against these changes and that you think more along the lines I do, that there are established LGBTQ characters that should be pushed to the forefront and pushed harder and have some investment in them to get them over, rather than taking established characters and doing a lot of these swaps on them, and you're against it, that's fine too. Now, I don't think that you should go out there and be denigrating or talking crap on people that are supporting these changes. They did not make these changes. The fans didn't. Certainly there's going to be a clash of cultures and people are going to have differing opinions. But this is all on DC Comics. Whether you support it, you can be thankful to DC Comics. If you do not support it and you think this is a bad idea, you should be critical of DC Comics. And they're publishing everything. But it's clear there is an agenda, whether you want to admit it or not. I think at this point, there's no denying it, whether you like it or not. It's clearly there. It's right there in the words of Tom Taylor. It's right there in the actions of Grant Morrison in some really shitty comic book pages this week. And it's been going on for several years now. And it's only going to pick up steam now that Daniel Cherry III, the new general manager of DC Comics, is not really the new general manager. He's just a general manager. I think he's been on the job for a year now, is up there at the forefront. I'm certain that he is one of the people that is pushing this agenda harder than anybody else. I have not confirmed that. Just my hunch.